Why Thomas, of all people? Well, it's an interesting story, right? One that so many of us live amongst, that so many of us are deeply affected by. We all have unique stories that were only made possible by Thomas Holloway, even if on the surface they have nothing to do with him. We all kind of carry its torch, you know. That's a pretty consequential story if you ask me. I do wonder if he could have predicted the legacy he would go on to have. Thomas Holloway spent decades shouting from the rooftop, his name printed across every newspaper in Britain and hung on hoardings at the foot of the pyramids. But now, he had nothing left to say, nothing left to sell, nothing left to give the world. The man who never stopped now rests beside his beloved wife Jane. Thomas Holloway died on the 26th of December, 1883, Boxing Day. He had not lived to see the Sanatorium open. He would not live to see the college open either. He knew he was successful. The baker's son from Devonport built a business empire that made him millions. But he would never see the lives he changed after his death.
Thomas's funeral took place here, St. Michael's and All Angels Church in Sunning Hill, Berkshire, not far from his two greatest life achievements. And as for the memorial, well, that was designed by an old friend.
Thomas and Jane's final resting place was designed by the very man who also designed their gifts to the nation, William Henry Crossland. Crossland would outlive his dear friend Thomas, but this meant that he was able to live long enough to see his profound legacy. Having reached the end of Thomas's life, I can reflect on the incredible experience it has been to make this documentary.
It's been an adventure, taking us beyond the borders of Egham, from the cities in northern France to the cobbled streets of Belgium, from Plymouth in Devon to Rochdale and York up north, as well as all the places in between, like here at Sunning Hill, where Thomas's story ended. But the Holloway story that he set in motion is far from over.
On the 30th of June 1886, 2.5 years after Thomas Holloway's death, a carriage pulled up to the gates of Holloway College. Queen Victoria stepped out. Having reigned at this point for 49 years, she had watched the whole arc of the Victorian age, its industry, its ambition, its grief, characteristics that defined Thomas Holloway. She walked through these gates and looked at what Thomas Holloway, the patent medicine manufacturer, the millionaire, the baker's son from Devonport, had built for the women of England. Victoria knew this place was special, fit for a king or a queen. She granted the royal prerogative, and Holloway College got a shiny new name. Thomas was not there to know this, and Jane had been gone for 11 years. But the buildings stood proudly, and the doors opened. The first cohort came. 28 women arrived at Royal Holloway College for the first time. Life in the early days of Royal Holloway was very different. This was no ordinary campus.
So the college, when it opened in the 1880s, was really a very different place to the college we know today. Obviously, the campus was very different. And the main building at that time was Founders Building. But of course, the student population was much smaller. All students lived in Founders, and everyone, when they arrived at the college, had a bedroom and a study.
Students were offered a range of subjects, and the reputation of the university eventually grew beyond local borders itself.
Almost 2 decades after the Royal Holloway story began, it left Egham once again.
Royal Holloway, that ornate building on the Surrey hillside, designed by a Yorkshireman, inspired by a French chateau, and funded by a quack doctor, joined the big leagues and became part of the University of London.
This building, Senate House in Bloomsbury, is the institutional heart of that group. University College, King's College, Bedford College, and now Royal Holloway, all brought together under a single name, the University of London, in a reform that placed this college formally and permanently at the forefront of British academic life. That boy from Devonport, who had tried to sell ointments as cures for any and every disease, who had never even attended university himself, had left behind an institution that now stood alongside some of the most respected seats of learning in the country. And in 1985, another exciting change took place.
Royal Holloway merged with Bedford College, another great women's institution, founded on that same principle that education was not for men alone.
With notable alumni such as the author George Eliot, who would even have an accommodation in Englefield Green named after her in 2017. But what was the fate of Thomas's other grand contribution? In 1948, the National Health Service came into being, and Britain decided, collectively, that care was not a privilege but a right. The Holloway Sanatorium was absorbed into it, but it would not survive forever. The sanatorium closed in December 1981.
Overall, it was a force for local good. For nearly a century, patients were treated with a uniquely high standard of care, and the institution provided jobs and attention to the local Virginia Water community.
What is now Virginia Park, a residential development, occupies the building that Thomas spent some of the last decades of his life commissioning, but the building still stands nonetheless. Crossland's stonework rises above the Surrey tree line, exactly as it was designed to, a Grade 1 listed monument, still standing proud after all these years, with stories from those who lived through its golden years being told by places like the Egham Museum, such as that of Joy Whitfield, a former nurse at the sanatorium. Thomas Holloway was born on the 22nd of September 1800 in Devonport. There was nothing there, from where he was from, to suggest that what followed was meant to be. He came to Penzance first, then Dunkirk, then Roubaix. 3 years in France that made him fluent, cosmopolitan, and ambitious in ways that he could not have achieved if he decided to sit still. And it was at Ypres that Crossland looked towards with inspiration. He saw the sanatorium before it even existed. He took the very soul of this building and carried it across the Channel and up the Thames to Surrey. But it was up north in Rochdale that Crossland first showed the world what he was capable of, a marker of his ambition and that same insistence on beauty for those who were not always expected to expect it. And London, of course, where Thomas arrived with nothing but an idea and a talent for making people believe in it, where he put his name on a jar, gambled, won, then lost, then came back and tried again. He wasn't always successful. In fact, at the height of his ambition, when facing up against Felix Albinolo, his old hero, Thomas was sent to prison for failing to pay his debts. A cold, isolated time, whilst the heat of the world carried on throughout his cell window. But Thomas did not give up. He carried on and established the legacy of which we all benefit from today. This Holloway story that we have been on has been a journey, an odyssey. We have charted Thomas's life from cradle to grave, seen up close the lands that inspired the mind that has changed so many lives. But the Holloway story does not belong to Thomas anymore.
The Holloway story is also Jane's Holloway story. It's Crossland's Holloway story. It would go on to become Emily Wilding Davison's Holloway story, Talansky's story too. Every person who picked up a prospectus and came to our area, it's their story as well. So many stories, so little time to tell them all.
It belongs to everyone who has walked through these gates, every student who has sat in these grounds, every patient, and now every resident who's lived at this site.
It belongs to the local community, a vibrant town that's seen episodes of the past which would go on to change the world.
And now, the story belongs to you. The Holloway story is never over. Where will we take it next?